I typically like to save my movie reviews for HSG Unlimited, but on this occasion, given that it's the Gran Turismo movie, it only seems appropriate to do it on the main channel, and I decided to get out and about to do the review because why not? Straight off the bat, my issue with this movie is I don't know who it was made for, because of course myself and many of you here on the channel are super fans of Gran Turismo. And the movie does a number of things which will, at the very least, irk a super fan, if not completely not make sense at all, and sometimes even be quite insulting to a GT fan. At the same time, I don't see it appealing to super young kids because it deals with crashes, death, there's a couple of F-bombs dropped. For people who know nothing about Gran Turismo, I guess it might introduce you to the concept of the series, but you may as well have called this Nissan, the movie. But that brings me to a couple of things which bothered me, and although I'm going to save it more so, you know, in the broad strokes for the second part of this video, because I'll do non-spoiler first, and then my spoiler thoughts in the second, because there's a lot of things that you have to get into about spoilers. But to spoil one thing, which is a smaller example, there is a plot point in this movie, relatively early on, revolving around players being deleted from the academy, and he's told to push the car to get the overtake in, of course, a Nissan GTR, because what else would it be? And he, you know, misjudges it, he tries to brake, and the car doesn't brake properly. He's got brake fade, and there's a kind of a mini investigation into whether or not it was brake fade. It turns out that he was right, it was brake fade, because of course. But when asked how did he know that, well, apart from the fact that literally anyone who's ever driven a car knows what brake fade feels like, because it's not really a rocket scientist kind of thing. You put your foot down and the brakes don't respond as they should, and you can feel them slipping. Again, you don't really need to have played Gran Turismo or even be a race driver to know that. But still, he quotes the reason as being, and I kid you not, he's played hours of Gran Turismo and done tuning in the game. And that's how he knows what brake fade feels like. Except any Gran Turismo player, myself included, finds that very insulting, because Gran Turismo does not and has never had brake fade in the game. So that's completely plucked out of thin air for no apparent reason. That's just one example. And again, I'm going to save the rest for the spoiler section. In terms of good stuff, because there's definitely some good stuff in here, I would say on the better side of things, the cinematography is nice. There are a couple of very nice choices when it comes to VFX. In particular, there's one toward the start, one toward the end. In terms of like having exploding car physics, like in the old WRC game kind of way, where you could explode the car and look at all the parts and then they come back together again. There's a couple of choices with that, or like when he's tuning in Gran Turismo, which despite the movie being set back in the GT Academy days, he's playing Gran Turismo 7. Doesn't make any sense, but whatever. But when he's tuning the car, he's imagining the car, you know, with the wings swapping out and stuff like that. It's a cool visual. Again, doesn't match up with the actual tuning screen in the game. One of the tuning screens he's on doesn't even exist in the game. But again, whatever. And the sound design is good. The music, it's fine. You know, mostly it's fairly generic. You know, saw this moment, or this moment's sad, or this moment's worrying. It's that kind of music. There's one musical standout from the whole movie for me, which I'll again get into in spoilers. It was more of an Easter egg. And what other good things were there? Well, again, without spoiling anything too specific, the movie gets a lot better from the Nurburgring onward. Let's just leave it at that. But even then, it encountered a major issue for me, which I'll talk about in a second, in terms of raising a very big issue, a valid issue to be discussed. And then it kind of just glosses over it in pretty much the next scene, after a light pep talk from, again, the salty character. So my overall thoughts before we get into spoilers are, if you're a Gran Turismo fan, you're going to go in wanting to like the movie. And that's the best thing this movie's got going for it. You want to like it already. Problem is, it makes a number of insulting choices to Gran Turismo players, which many people would think, that's not really that important, but to us players it would be, because let's be honest here, if you're going to make a Gran Turismo movie, we are the people who need to be appealed to first, and then the rest of the audience. So they dropped the ball on that one. But then in terms of people who don't know much about Gran Turismo, well, aside from setting up expectations about the game, which, as I just alluded to, you wouldn't actually find in the game were you to play it afterward, such as brake fade being one very simple example. Again, I don't know who it was for. It feels more like an ego-stroking exercise from Nissan, and or Kaz, and I know Kaz is proud of what he's accomplished, as he should be. Kaz technically is played by a character in the movie, kind of wafts in and out of scenes like a silent guru, but yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's like a pat on the back movie for themselves, and it feels much more like the Nissan Academy movie rather than the Gran Turismo movie. They really do struggle to fit the game into the narrative of the film. You could, to be honest, take Gran Turismo out and you could have called this Forza. If Forza had a program like it, there would have been zero difference whatsoever between this movie and a Forza movie. The only difference is that Gran Turismo had the program and Forza didn't. There's nothing uniquely Gran Turismo about the movie beyond the name, and the name is what is giving this movie any kind of box office income that it's going to get at the moment. I think if it had a more generic name, it would be making even less money, the actors' strike notwithstanding. So my overall thoughts are, you don't need to rush out and see it. It feels like a Netflix original movie or a TV movie, in my opinion. Yeah, I feel like a fan film on some occasions has actually engendered more positive feedback from me than this studio production. So yeah, that's it for my non-spoiler thoughts. To get into the spoilery stuff, I did like some Easter eggs in the movie. So there were 4 Easter eggs that stood out to me. Super GT gets kind of a shout out in the movie. Not really, it's a blink and you'll miss it thing. When he's watching Gran Turismo stuff at the dinner table toward the start, you can see the channel is Super GT. That was cool. Second thing which I liked was, of course, that Moon Over the Castle gets played in the movie very briefly, and that was a nice nod to the players, because the players are the only people who would understand what the relevance of that music is. So that was cool. I kind of wish they'd have used more Gran Turismo music, actually. There were a lot of Gran Turismo sound effects, like the boo, boo of menu selection sounds, but beyond that, not much. Third thing, there was an incredibly random Koenigsegg Gemera in the movie, for whatever reason, which was cool, I guess, for all of 10 seconds. And what was the fourth one? Oh, the fourth one, of course, is Kaz, the actual Kazunori's cameo in the movie as the sushi chef, I believe it was, in Japan, which was cool. That was a cool way of dropping him in. It was cool to see him in the film, and you kind of have to have him in there somewhere. But yeah, that was the four little Easter eggs that I noticed. There may have been some that I missed, but those are the 4. Another thing that bothered me, though, in spoiler territory, was that, and I don't know if any of you guys noticed this, I would imagine that you did, again, as Gran Turismo fans. When they're in the academy, starting out in the Nissan GTRs, Jan's GTR is not a Nismo. And that's like the nerdiest thing to notice, I'm aware, but I can't be the only person who noticed that. They are all driving Nismo GTRs, and he's in just like a premium 2017 GTR. So aside from the fact that that wasn't a fair race to begin with, and I believe the only reason why they made that choice is so that his car would stand out just a little bit more, so you'd know who to watch. But again, who was that made for? Like, who was that choice for? If you've already got a bunch of Nismos, why did you have one that wasn't a Nismo? Because fans would know which car he's in, because they're not stupid, and people who don't know probably wouldn't see the difference between GTRs anyway. So again, it's like these weird choices made here and there, unless it was a deliberate thing. But again, why would you do that? But yeah, it feels like to me the movie builds up to potential, and then it doesn't ever actually reach the summit. It like builds and then drops, and then starts to build and then drops. Like, it never gets there. The thing that bothered me the most, to be honest, in the entire movie was actually Orlando Bloom. I don't know what he was doing in this movie. Some kind of weird corporate Jack Sparrow meets, I don't know, almost like his self-tape audition to be in the movie. He's a good actor, we know that, but he feels like he's almost literally phoning it in the movie. The best actor is definitely Djimon Hounsou, who plays Jan's dad. He's great, completely wasted in this movie. I find it very sad that he finds it very difficult, apparently, to get work in Hollywood, despite being really well known and really good. He's been in Marvel movies and all kinds of things, but apparently he still finds it hard to get roles. He's totally wasted in this movie. Or he's not wasted in the movie, he serves his role very well. He's just wasted being in the movie at all. He's way better than this. David Harbour, of course, he's great. He's incredibly overdramatic, though. His character, as far as I know, didn't exist in real life, as I believe was the same with the love interest, also didn't exist. She may as well have not existed in the movie either. She serves no purpose whatsoever. Yeah, I think the biggest issue I had with the film, aside from, you know, from a storytelling, from a movie-making perspective, Orlando Bloom, or more so his character, was what bothered me the most, because the character is this like, again, I don't know what he's supposed to be, because he conceptualized the idea, but then he's also simultaneously trying to undermine his own idea constantly, saying, oh, is Jan really the right one? And almost like the blonde dude, I don't recall the actor's name, in the Ford v Ferrari movie, who's constantly trying to undermine Ken Miles and Carroll Shelby. It's almost like this movie's version of him, but it never has any reason for Orlando Bloom to be like that. So that was very odd. Some really weird character motivations in the movie that made no sense. And yeah, I think the thing that bothered me the most from like a morale or like message perspective was after the Nurburgring crash. To me, the Nurburgring is simultaneously the best and worst part of the movie. The best in terms of the acting. I love it when he realized that he'd killed someone. The crash itself looked fantastic, very reminiscent of the CLR flip at Le Mans, and various others too. I think it happened to a 911 GT1 at Le Mans as well. And all of us know that part of the Nurburgring from playing the game, of course. Fantastic crash, very well filmed. That feeling of the pit in your stomach as the car takes off. And speaking as someone who has been in 2 accidents, one on a motorcycle, one in a car, both times I felt like a passenger in the moment where you just lose control. I spun out in a Porsche, and from the moment that it spun out on black ice, I was a passenger from that point. The last thing I remember was facing traffic, going backwards on the motorway, and then putting my head through the driver's window and waking up. So I know that feeling of losing control, and the movie did a good job of that. Kind of being in shock. Jerry Halliwell plays his mum, which was an interesting choice of casting, and her acting is very good in the moment, just breaking down about her son potentially being dead. Again, Djimon Hounsou, fantastic. But then the problem that I have is when they go out in the 911 to the corner and they start talking about it. Because Jan's reaction is the one you should have. You should feel completely destroyed, having taken someone's life for the sake of a sport. But then that is then turned into what essentially amounts to, don't let someone's death put off your dream. And I just can't say that I agree with that message, because to me that is both incredibly disrespectful to the party who was killed. Again, I believe that is accurate to real life. If so, certainly is disrespectful. And even though the person who was there was, of course, a spectator, a fan of the sport, maybe even they, if they could speak posthumously, would have said, no, I want you to get back in the saddle again and race. Maybe they would, but we don't know that because they're dead. And the fact that it is glossed over so quickly in basically a drive in a 911 and a bit of a pep talk from old Salty, I just found it very disrespectful. And I think that might just be a me thing. I think a lot of people won't have an issue with that at all, but I am sensitive to stuff like that. And that's just not really given much thought in this movie. It's very surface level. So yeah, like I said, it's simultaneously my favourite part and the part that I like the least in the whole film. Because the actual crash, his response, being in hospital, not wanting to speak to his parents, essentially being in shock, their response, everyone's acting is the best it is in the movie. But then the message after just completely negates it all for me. So yeah, it's an incredibly mixed bag movie. I could keep nitpicking good and bad things all day long, but overall, yeah, I mean, if you're watching this part of the video, doubtless you've already seen it, so I'd love to hear your thoughts. For those maybe who think I'm being too harsh on the movie, do you think there are things that I got wrong or things that I was not seeing in the right way? If you did like it, I'd love to hear why. I feel like the best this movie can achieve for me is like there's a Gran Turismo movie now. But it really didn't need to be. There's nothing uniquely Gran Turismo about it, aside from the name. And it just felt like a kind of really high-budget marketing movie about Nissan to me, which is kind of a shame. But yeah, that's it for my thoughts overall on the Gran Turismo movie. Tell me yours down below, and of course, stick around on the channel. I'd say for more movie reviews, but not necessarily on this channel. That's over on HSG Unlimited. But for certainly more Gran Turismo content, of course, that is here on the channel. So until next time, I'll see you then. And for now, as always, thanks for watching.